I've replayed the moment I met Olivia 1,000 times in my head. It was in Chemistry 101, during my second semester at college. She walked into class and I swear time stopped for a second. Everything around me blurred, but she stood out, like a living goddess, commanding the attention of the entire room without even trying. I'd never seen anyone like her in real life, blonde, flawless, with porcelain skin and eyes that were an impossible shade of blue. She looked like she belonged in some high-fashion magazine, not sitting next to a bunch of nerds in a chemistry lecture hall. Everyone noticed her that day. Hell, I don't think a single person in that room didn't turn to stare as she took her seat. She wore designer clothes that screamed wealth and she carried herself with a kind of effortless grace. Meanwhile, I sat there in my worn-out hoodie, scribbling notes with a pen that barely worked, trying to figure out what the hell stoichiometry was. I remember thinking, she's so far out of my league I'm not even in the same universe. I wasn't ugly or anything, but compared to Olivia, I was invisible. I was just Ethan, the guy who was good at chemistry, the guy who had to work 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet. I was from a middle-class background while Olivia came from old money. Her father was some big-time businessman with a string of companies I could never keep track of, and her mother was one of those elegant women who looked like they belonged on the cover of a glossy socialite magazine. I never imagined she'd even notice me, let alone talk to me. It wasn't until a few months into the semester that things changed. One afternoon, as I was packing up my things, Emily, a mutual friend, came up to me with a smirk on her face. "You won't believe this," she said, her tone teasing. "But Olivia Summers needs help with chemistry. She asked if you could tutor her." I froze, thinking it was a joke. Olivia, needing my help? It had to be a prank. I was convinced her boyfriend at the time, Daniel, a guy who embodied everything I hated about rich and titled frat boys, was behind it. He'd been dating Olivia for a while, and the guy was the epitome of arrogance. I thought he'd put her up to it, just to humiliate me. "Yeah, right," I scoffed. "What, did Daniel dare her or something?" Emily laughed. "No, seriously, she asked for your help. Finals are coming up and she's not prepared." I hesitated but eventually agreed. I figured the worst that could happen was a little embarrassment, but I had nothing to lose. So the next week, I found myself sitting across from Olivia in the library, helping her understand chemical reactions. To my surprise, she was genuinely struggling and genuinely grateful for my help. It wasn't a prank after all. Slowly, we became friends. At first, it was strictly academic. She'd ask me about chemistry and I'd explain, but then we started talking about other things, our lives, our dreams, our fears. She'd share bits of her world, stories about her wealthy but controlling parents, and how she felt trapped by their expectations. I'd listen, fascinated by how different her life was from mine. She was so much more than her beauty and wealth. Beneath all of that was a kind, thoughtful girl who just wanted to be seen for who she really was. Before I knew it, I was falling for her. Hard. It wasn't long before Olivia broke up with Daniel. She said she was tired of his arrogance and the way he treated her like an accessory. Then, almost out of nowhere, she started showing interest in me. At first I didn't believe it. How could someone like Olivia see anything in me? But she did, and we began dating. It was surreal, like I had somehow stepped into someone else's life. But as much as I loved Olivia, deep down, I knew something was off, something about us. There was always this gnawing feeling that I wasn't enough for her. She came from wealth and privilege, while I came from practically nothing. I tried to bury those insecurities, but they lingered, quietly poisoning everything. Our relationship moved quickly. Too quickly maybe. Olivia got pregnant and her parents weren't happy about it. They wanted her to get an abortion, to focus on her career, but she refused. She loved me, and against their wishes, she kept the baby and married me. I should have been on top of the world, but there was always this shadow looming over us, this sense that I wasn't the husband she deserved. Still, I loved her, and I vowed to be the best man I could for her and our son Caleb. As we settled into married life, I thought things were going well. Olivia was an amazing wife, kind, patient, always willing to support me, even when I didn't have much to offer. But my insecurities didn't just go away. If anything, they started growing. Anytime we went out together, I could feel the stares of other men. And it wasn't just my imagination. They were staring. Olivia was the kind of woman people noticed, and it drove me insane. However, Olivia always assured me that she only had eyes for me. I'd see the way men would look at her, undressing her with their eyes, and I'd feel this burning jealousy rise inside me. I hated it. I hated that I couldn't handle it, that I felt threatened by every sideways glance or lingering look. I tried to brush it off at first, to tell myself it didn't matter. But it did. Every time we went out in public, I'd find myself watching her closely, looking for any sign that she might be interested in someone else. She never gave me a reason to doubt her, but the doubt was there, festering inside me like a disease. The night of the accident was the turning point. We had just left a family gathering at Olivia's parents' mansion, a place that always made me feel small. Their wealth was overwhelming, like a constant reminder that I didn't belong. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible, especially with Daniel there. Seeing him after all these years, standing tall with his perfect life, brought all my insecurities rushing back. He was still close to her family, still the golden boy in their eyes, and I couldn't help but wonder if Olivia ever regretted choosing me over him. We didn't talk much during the drive home. The rain was pouring down, hammering against the windshield, and the tension in the car was thick. I could feel it building inside me, this tight knot of frustration and anger. Finally, I broke the silence. "You looked happy tonight," I said, my voice tight. "Seeing Daniel again." Olivia sighed, already sensing where this was going. "Ethan, don't do this." "Do what? Pretend like it didn't bother you? You two were practically joined at the hip the whole night." "That's not fair," she shot back, her voice strained. I was polite. "He's an old friend, nothing more." "An old boyfriend," I muttered. She shook her head. "Why do you always do this? Why do you have to make everything about Daniel or other men? I'm with you, Ethan. I married you." Her words should have reassured me, but instead they felt like gasoline on the fire. "You can't help it, can you? You love the attention. Everywhere we go men stare at you, and you love it." She turned to me, eyes wide with hurt. "That's not true. Isn't it? You never try to stop them. You don't even notice, do you? How it makes me feel." The rain was coming down harder now, the windshield wipers working overtime, but the road was slick. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as our argument escalated. The hurtful words flew back and forth between us, both of us too angry to back down. Then, Olivia said something that cut me deeper than anything else. "Maybe if you weren't so insecure all the time, we wouldn't have this problem." That was it. The tipping point. I turned to look at her, eyes filled with hurt and anger, and in that split second, I lost control of the car. There was a bright flash, headlights from the oncoming vehicle, and before I knew it, everything went black. I woke up in the hospital, confused, groggy, and in pain. My entire body ached and I couldn't move my legs. Panic set in as the doctors explained what had happened. I had survived the crash, but my spine had taken a brutal hit. They weren't sure if I'd ever walk again. Olivia had been injured too, but not as badly as me. She had cuts and bruises, but I was the one who'd be in a wheelchair indefinitely. At first, all I could think about was the physical pain, the shock of knowing I might never walk again. But then, as the days turned into weeks, the emotional pain set in. I was trapped in this broken body, stuck in our house, and worst of all, stuck in my own mind. The paranoia that had always been there, lurking in the background, suddenly came crashing down on me like a tidal wave. I was helpless now, completely dependent on Olivia. I couldn't work, couldn't drive, couldn't do anything I used to. And while she took on more responsibility, getting a job and stepping into the role of provider, I sat there watching her every move, convinced that she was slipping away from me. I tried to shake the thoughts, tried to tell myself that she loved me and was just trying to help. But every time she left for work, dressed in her professional clothes, looking as stunning as ever, my mind would go to dark places. Who was she dressing up for? Who was she spending time with? Was she really just at work, or was she seeing someone else? I became obsessed with the idea that she was having an affair. I started checking her phone when she wasn't looking, going through her messages, looking for any clue that might confirm my suspicions. I didn't find anything, but the paranoia didn't go away. It just kept growing, consuming me. It had been 3 months since the accident, and I was still adjusting to life in a wheelchair. Every day felt like a battle. Not just with my own body, but with my mind. Olivia had been strong through it all. She took care of Caleb, the house, and me without complaint, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had just landed a job at her father's firm, something she was excited about, and I pretended to be happy for her. In reality, the news ate at me. Her first day on the job, she came home in a sleek navy business dress, her hair in loose waves, looking like she had stepped off a magazine cover. She was glowing. Whether it was from excitement or from all the male attention I was sure she was getting, I couldn't tell. But all I saw was a woman who was going to work in a world where I didn't belong. A world where rich, powerful men could see her every day. She walked through the door, kissed me on the cheek and went to check on Caleb, who was already asleep in his room. I sat there, stewing in silence, watching her move around the house like everything was normal. "How was work?" I asked, my voice tight. "It was good," she said, her voice tired but content. "A little overwhelming, but good. They're asking me to meet with clients already. Can you believe that?" I nodded, not really listening. "Clients?" She smiled, unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Yeah, some of them are really big names. We're hosting a networking event next week and I'll be helping out." Networking. With powerful, wealthy men. I could already picture it. Olivia laughing, smiling, wearing those tight dresses that showed off her perfect figure while men fawned over her. I couldn't help myself. The words spilled out before I could stop them. "And I'm guessing you'll be the main attraction." She turned to me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you know exactly what kind of attention you're going to get. You'll be there, looking the way you do, and those guys, they'll eat it up. You think they're interested in business? No. They're interested in you." Her face fell, the hurt clearly visible in her eyes. "Ethan, that's not fair. I'm doing this for us. For Caleb." "You sure about that? Or are you doing it because you like the attention?" Her jaw clenched, but she didn't shout. Olivia rarely raised her voice, even when I pushed her. "You know that's not true," she said softly. "I've never given you a reason not to trust me." "And yet I don't," I snapped. "How can I when you're out there with all those guys who can offer you more than I ever could?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. "Ethan, I love you. But this jealousy is tearing us apart." But I wasn't ready to listen. The image of her in that office, surrounded by men who could walk, who could provide for her, ate at me like a disease. "Maybe it would be easier if you didn't dress like that for work. You know what you're doing when you wear those clothes." Her voice cracked. "So now I'm dressing provocatively? Is that what you think?" The guilt tugged at me, but I was too far gone. "I think you enjoy it." That night we went to bed in silence. I didn't want to see the tears she was trying to hide. 2 months passed by like this and things had only gotten worse. Olivia had been working longer hours, taking on more responsibilities at her job. She had always told me when she'd be late, but tonight she texted saying she had to go to dinner with some clients, a high-end restaurant downtown. I stared at her message for a long time, my chest tightening with every second that passed. When she came home, it was almost midnight. I was sitting in the living room, the TV off, waiting. She walked in, still in that figure-hugging black dress she had worn to the dinner. Her heels clicked on the hardwood floor as she put her purse down and let out a long breath. "Hey," she said, pulling her hair out of its updo. "Sorry I'm so late, it was a long dinner." I didn't respond right away, my eyes narrowing as I scanned her face, looking for any sign that something was off. Was she flushed? Had she been drinking? Laughing with someone else? "Who was at this dinner?" I finally asked, my tone icy. Olivia raised her eyebrows, sensing the tension. "Just the usual people, clients from the firm, my boss, a few partners." "Why? And how did it go? Did they enjoy the view?" I shot back, my words dripping with accusation. She froze, her expression a mixture of shock and hurt. "What is that supposed to mean?" "You know what I mean," I said, my voice rising. "You go out in that dress, to some fancy dinner with rich clients, and you expect me to believe it's all professional? They're men, Olivia. They're not blind." Her eyes flared with anger, and for the first time in months she didn't hold back. "You're unbelievable. This is my job, Ethan. I'm working to support us. I shouldn't have to come home and defend myself every time I interact with another man." "You don't get it, do you?" I shouted. "You have everything, your looks, your job, your family's money. And I'm stuck here, in this chair, unable to do anything. You could leave me any time and you know it. I bet they all see that too." Olivia's face was flushed now, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I chose you, Ethan. I chose you over Daniel. Over my family's expectations, over everything. But this jealousy, it's killing me. I can't keep reassuring you when you refuse to trust me." I could see the pain in her eyes, but I was too far gone, too consumed by my own insecurities to stop. Maybe you're right, I spat. Maybe you should have stayed with Daniel. At least he can walk. At least he can give you the life you deserve. She stared at me, her breath hitching as if I had slapped her. Then without another word, she walked out of the room, and I heard the bedroom door close with a soft click. After she left, I sat there thinking, what's wrong with me? The idea of constantly hurting my wife was killing me from the inside. I knew she was innocent. And the fault was with me, but I couldn't help it. So after a few days, I was sitting in the therapist's office. I didn't want to go. The idea of sitting in front of a stranger, talking about my feelings, made me nauseous. Therapy was for people who were weak. At least, that's what I had always believed. But Olivia insisted. After that last fight, where I broke her down to tears and watched the love in her eyes turn to pain, she gave me an ultimatum. I can't keep doing this, Ethan. If you don't get help, I don't know if we can survive. Her words were like a dagger in my chest. As much as I hated the idea of therapy, I hated the idea of losing her even more. So begrudgingly, I agreed to go. The first session was awkward. The therapist, Dr. Monroe, was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. She greeted me with a soft smile and gestured for me to sit. I wheeled myself into the room, feeling the weight of my wheelchair more than ever. It was as if the chair itself symbolized all my failures. My inability to walk, to work, to be the man I thought I should be. So Ethan, she began, her voice gentle but firm. Why are you here today? I glanced at her, then down at my hands, which were resting in my lap. I didn't know how to start. Should I talk about the accident? The fact that I couldn't stand to look at myself in the mirror anymore? Or should I dive straight into my paranoia about Olivia? I don't know, I muttered. My wife thinks I need help. Dr. Monroe nodded. What do you think? I shrugged, avoiding her gaze. I guess I'm not the same as I was before. The accident changed everything. She waited patiently, letting the silence hang in the air until I felt compelled to fill it. I wasn't always like this, I said, my voice quieter now. I wasn't always this insecure. And what changed? She asked, leaning in slightly. I sighed, rubbing my face with my hands. I guess everything. I've always known Olivia was out of my league, but after the accident, when I couldn't walk anymore, couldn't provide for her, it just got worse. She's beautiful, successful, and I'm just this. I gestured to my legs, to the chair that confined me. Dr. Monroe nodded, her eyes compassionate but probing. You've tied a lot of your self-worth to your physical abilities and your role as a provider, haven't you? I didn't respond right away. It was like she had put words to something I hadn't even fully realized. I guess so, I finally admitted. I feel like I failed her. And myself. By the second session, I was still hesitant, but something about the first one had shifted something inside me. Dr. Monroe wasn't what I expected. She didn't judge me, and she didn't push too hard. She simply asked the questions I hadn't dared ask myself. So let's talk about your marriage, she said, opening the session. You've mentioned that you feel insecure, particularly about Olivia's beauty and the attention she gets from other men. Tell me more about that. I let out a bitter laugh. It's not just her beauty. It's everything. She's perfect, smart, kind, loving. And she's with me, a guy who can't even walk anymore. I'm terrified she's going to wake up one day and realize she can do so much better. Dr. Monroe tilted her head. And do you think Olivia has given you any reason to believe she would leave you? I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Had she? Every accusation I had thrown at her, every suspicion, was born from my own mind. She had never actually done anything to make me doubt her loyalty. No, I finally admitted. She's never given me a reason. But I see how other men look at her, and I can't help but think that she deserves more. Dr. Monroe leaned forward. It sounds like the issue isn't with Olivia. It's with how you see yourself. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so focused on Olivia, on her beauty and the attention she received, that I hadn't stopped to think about how much of it was rooted in my own self-loathing. You've lost a lot, Ethan, Dr. Monroe continued. Your mobility, your sense of independence, your role as the provider in your household. But those things don't define your worth. Your relationship with Olivia isn't about what you can give her materially or physically. It's about love, trust, and partnership. And it sounds like Olivia has been there for you, despite your insecurities. I nodded, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. For the first time, I realized how much I had been pushing Olivia away, not because of anything she had done, but because I couldn't face my own fears. By the time we reached the 4th session, I had begun to open up more. Therapy wasn't a quick fix, but each time I talked I felt like I was shedding layers of guilt, fear, and anger. Dr. Monroe asked me to explore what trust really meant to me and how I could rebuild it, not just with Olivia, but with myself. Trust is about letting go of control, she said. It's about accepting that you can't monitor or manage every aspect of your partner's life. Olivia has shown you love, commitment, and loyalty. What would it look like if you allowed yourself to believe that? If you stopped looking for reasons to doubt her? The question hung in the air. I had spent so much energy trying to catch Olivia in some imaginary betrayal that I hadn't even allowed myself to enjoy the fact that she was still by my side. It would mean I could breathe again, I said softly. It would mean I could stop feeling like I'm constantly on the verge of losing her. Dr. Monroe smiled. Exactly. And the more you trust her, the more you can focus on yourself, on your recovery, your healing, and your relationship. Trust is a two-way street, Ethan. If you show her that you trust her, she'll feel more connected to you. Therapy has been a turning point for me, a lifeline in the storm of my insecurities. Each session has peeled back layers of doubt, revealing the root causes of my fears and allowing me to confront them head-on. I remember sitting in that small, comfortable room for the first time, feeling like an imposter. What did I have to complain about? Yet as Dr. Monroe gently guided me through my thoughts, I began to see the connections between my childhood experiences and my current struggles. It was liberating yet terrifying to acknowledge that my feelings of inadequacy didn't just stem from the accident, but had roots that ran deep, buried in years of feeling like I had to prove myself. With each passing week, I learned to challenge the irrational thoughts that once consumed me. I started to replace the old, negative narratives, those that told me I was unworthy or would inevitably lose Olivia, with positive affirmations about myself and my capabilities. I could feel a shift happening within me, like the fog that had clouded my mind was slowly dissipating. My relationship with Olivia has transformed in ways I never thought possible. The incessant fighting has given way to open, honest conversations, where we could share our fears without judgment. I remember one night, after a particularly enlightening session, I came home and took her hands in mine, looking her in the eye. "I'm sorry for everything, Liv. I've been so caught up in my own head that I lost sight of what really matters." She smiled, and it was like I could finally see the love in her eyes without the cloud of suspicion hanging over us. Though Olivia is still the primary earner, I no longer feel like a burden. I've started tutoring kids online, sharing my passion for chemistry with eager learners. It's exhilarating to rediscover that part of myself, the part that had always dreamed of inspiring others through science. I still remember my first session with a bright-eyed 8th grader who was struggling with the subject. As I explained the principles of chemical reactions, I could see the lights go on in her eyes, and it rekindled something in me. A sense of purpose I thought I'd lost forever. It felt incredible to know that I could contribute in some way, that I could make a difference in someone's life. At the same time, my physical therapy sessions have become a beacon of hope. Each day I push myself a little harder, feeling the strain in my muscles but also the thrill of progress. I can now move around using a cane, and each step I take feels like a small victory against the confines of my wheelchair. I can't explain the exhilaration of standing upright again, feeling the ground beneath my feet instead of being confined to a chair. I remember one day, as I managed to take a few tentative steps without assistance, the joy that surged through me was palpable. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that I thought was gone forever. Seeing my progress fills me with pride, and no one is happier about it than Olivia. Her smile lights up when she sees me take those small steps, her eyes shining with encouragement and love. "You're doing amazing, Ethan. I'm so proud of you," she would say, and I could feel her genuine happiness radiating around us. It's moments like these that remind me of the strength of our bond. I realize that my journey toward healing isn't just about me, it's about us. Together, we're rebuilding a life filled with trust, hope and love, one day at a time. As I sit here reflecting on how far I've come, I feel a sense of gratitude washing over me. I've learned that healing isn't linear, and it's okay to have bad days, but the important part is that I'm moving forward. I've finally begun to believe that I am worthy of Olivia's love, and I am determined to prove it not just to her, but to myself. The future feels bright, and for the first time in a long while, I'm excited to see what lies ahead.